Hi, I'm Din, and here's another piece of therapy art homework, so it's time for some introspective thoughts about an introspective piece. Again. The prompt my therapist gave me for this was that she wanted me to, in some way, illustrate the time in my life when I was the most busy. That period of time was a couple of years back, and I was studying full time, working part time. I was moderating two separate internet communities, and I still somehow maintained an active social life and an active family life. I was a bit surprised by this initially because for a very long time I've considered that time period my best period. When I was at my most normal and I felt like I was on top of the world. I was doing really well in school. I was earning money while doing it at a job I was pretty good at. And I felt fulfilled and needed by my internet tasks because it wasn't just moderation, it was also about world building and running events and such for each respective community. And I had good friends, both offline and online. I was entering a mentorship program at school where I got in touch with someone working in the field that I wanted to work in, and I felt like I had so much potential and like my life would work out great. But the more time I spent thinking about why she wanted me to reflect on this, the more I started to sort of see the cracks in a new light. The cracks that had always been there. Like how I barely slept at all to juggle all of these things. I didn't really sleep so much as take frequent naps. And I was awake for way too long for many, many stretches of time. I was up for 42 hours straight one time, and at the time, my perception of what that meant was so warped that I was just kind of peeved that I hadn't made it to 48 hours just for the bragging rights. I was having auditory hallucinations all the time because I was so sleep deprived, but I just laughed them off like it wasn't a big deal or it didn't really matter. I remember being borderline delirious on occasion when trying to communicate with people over text because I was so tired. But that was fine because I could just take another nap later, right? Sure. I was living out of my day planner. I was taking notes very diligently about where I should be and when, and I wouldn't have remembered anything at all without it because I was doing so much. I consulted it for everything and would write down where and when I'd be seeing friends, even because if I didn't, I would just forget. I couldn't make spontaneous plans to hang out or whatever without writing them down because I just genuinely had no idea what my days looked like from one day to the next. And yet I thought of myself as doing well, as feeling good and strong and feeling normal. Like I was finally having a good life and this was a normal price to pay. Everyone lived like this. And I was feeling like I had this opportunity to prove my past wrong and fulfill my potential, so there was no time for questioning it. I just had to keep going and going and going. And reflecting on all that now, I think I was in some kind of manic state, which could track because I'd been incredibly depressed before this period, and then I just threw myself into everything at once. I talked to my therapist about it, and she agrees that it sounds kind of manic, or like I was disassociating the whole time at minimum. But they're kind of related states, so she's not fussy about labeling it. Um, she really liked this painting too, by the way, which means I'm still getting a good grade in therapy, which is a normal thing to want and possible to achieve. But she seems proud of me for through this exercise realizing that the way I was living wasn't sustainable. And I'm happy about that. I'm glad that she seems to approve of my thoughts about this. I had a breakdown after a year or two of this. like a complete breakdown where I slept all the time and I stopped eating and I almost developed agoraphobia and it was really bad. And the reason I had a breakdown is that an external event, nothing to do with me, but something happened that shattered the illusion I'd been living in for so long at that point, where this thing happened and I just realized that I wasn't doing okay. I wasn't happy or fulfilled. I still felt empty and hollow inside, and it felt like I was just playing charades. I was playing the role of normalcy to try to trick everyone, including myself, that I was okay. And that was really painful when it came crashing down like that. It was really, really hard to swallow because I felt like I'd been overcoming my childhood abuse, and then it turns out that it still had me in some kind of death grip, and I felt like I'd never be free of my trauma at all. So I did know that the way that I was living wasn't good for me when I came out of it, but I spent so much time feeling that I was doing okay that I've still spent some time longing to return to this sense of accomplishment that I had then. Like years later, I can still kind of mourn for this period of time as something that I lost and that I didn't want to lose. But now I feel like I can start to let that go. Because painting this and thinking about what I wanted to paint and how to try to condense this period into a single image, it helped me see things in a different light. That the way I was living wasn't sustainable and I would have burned out really quickly if I kept going, and that I fooled myself so well that I still think this was good actually. Like it's like I'm finally seeing through my own bias about this period of time and how destructive it actually was to me. So, anyway, the artwork itself is pretty obvious in the face of all that, I think. I quickly honed in on masking as a concept because I felt like I'm playing a role before, so it was kind of readily available in my mental library. It's a concept that's a little on the nose, but we're not here to fix what isn't broken. You know, we're just here to try to get better. I just put a list of stuff on the mask that are approximates to the tasks that I remember having at this time. It's not really important what the list says so much as the impression of the list and the amount of things on the list, and the fact that they're all crossed out. You know, the tasks have more or less been completed across this long list that covers the whole face. As you saw in the beginning, I took a selfie with a mask I had lying around. So this one came together pretty quickly because I could trace it and I didn't have to spend any time thinking too hard about the composition or anatomy or anything like that. You know, sometimes you gotta work smarter, not harder. And I uh, remembered that I had this mask, so I chose to make it easy for myself. It's a Marvel Hornets cosplay mask, by the way. So if you haven't seen Marvel Hornets, you should. It's very, very good if you like horror stuff. And I do, I love horror stuff. But I had to change it, obviously. So it represented what it needed to represent now instead of um, just being a random cosplay mask. But it was very nice to have that as a base. The only thing that I did add, or well, change, was I added bangs because I remember having bangs at the time and I thought that adding them would help frame the mask a little bit better to make it easier to read visually, so that it's primarily competing against the ginger hair rather than a pale face, because I'm very pale. I'm really happy with how it came out ultimately, and I'm really, really glad that my therapist asked me to draw this, because I think I've done a lot of mental work in reflecting on this already just by having done this. And it feels like I can start to let go of this idea what success and normalcy should look like. Having had my anti-capitalist awakening since then also helps, because it means I can call bullshit on the norms that are forced on me and see through the propaganda and the idea of productivity as worth easier. Like, hell, at the time when all this was happening, I wasn't even a feminist yet. I didn't know enough about it. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't felt like I had encountered anything like that. But now I would put feminist at the top of my list of things that I am, really. So my values have changed since then, and what matters now is that my recovery aligns with my current values instead of those imposed on me. Again, this kind of video is more for myself than anyone else, but if you're still here, I hope you got something out of this little story. And I hope that you're doing well out there and taking care of yourself, and that you're sleeping properly, because hallucinations are not fun. Believe me, they are not worth it. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.